planned to call it after myself. That was fake news. Probably going to call it the Presidential Ballroom or something like that. We haven't really thought about a name yet.
So President Trump is saying that his new White House ballroom will not be named after himself. That was on Friday as he directly addressed reports that he would indeed dub the new space the Donald J. Trump Ballroom. Backlash over the project has really grown after the entire East Wing was demolished to make way for the new structure. The plans for the space have also expanded and gotten more expensive, now costing more than $300 million and nearly doubling the size of the entire rest of the White House. Conservative columnist Peggy Noonan's latest piece for the Wall Street Journal is titled "A Republic, But Can We Keep It?" In it, Peggy writes about America's long history and President Trump's heavy-handed changes to the government, including the demolition of the White House East Wing. Peggy writes in part this: "All this was done without public demand or support and was done in a way that was abrupt, complete, unstoppable. Congress has the power of the purse for such projects, but the president says no. Our wonderful donors are paying for it." But the names of the donors were not quickly revealed. Your imagination was forced to go to why. Might certain bad actors be buying influence? Crypto kings, billionaires needing agency approvals, felons buying pardons, AI chieftains on the prowl. Might the whole thing be open to corruption? Would it even have been attempted in a fully functioning, sharp and hungry republic, or only a tired one that's being diminished? The photos of the tearing down of the East Wing were upsetting because they felt like a metaphor for the idea that history itself can be made to disappear. And Joe, you know, there are so many issues facing this country right now. It is of note, though, how the destruction of the East Wing and the way it was done. It'd be one thing if this was a weeks-long, months-long approval process with reviews and commissions and architects and Congress gets involved. That'd be one thing. But the way this was done so swiftly with no notice, and the way plans just changed from a minor renovation to the demolition of the entire East Wing, really did seem to upset a lot of people. And to Peggy's point, an on-the-nose metaphor for how President Trump is leading in his second term.
Well, the president, David Ignatius, said just a couple of weeks ago, we aren't going to touch the East Wing. And then 2 weeks later, the entire East Wing is destroyed. There are no plans. There is no consulting with historical organizations on trying to make sure the history of America is preserved. And that's not just for Democrats. That's not just for people who are saying, "Oh, look, he's owning the libs." What, you're tearing down the East Wing of the White House to own the libs? This isn't just libs that are being owned. I mean, Congress, again, not a peep. Nobody's stepping in saying, hey, maybe we should look over this and see this. And so it does seem to be a particularly apt metaphor where the president 1 week says we're not going to touch the East Wing. The next week he destroys, that half of the White House that has been home to such history. No other president in our lifetime would have even thought about doing this, just on instinct, so abruptly, David. And so, yeah, Peggy's right, and Peggy's been around. She's worked in that East Wing. You've been around. I've been in and out of it for 30 years. There's incredible history. There was incredible history there. And idiots online that are saying, oh, we're owning the libs. Presidents have done this before. Yes, presidents have done a lot of things before, but they haven't done it on a whim like this. They've usually gone to Congress. As I explained last week, Harry Truman went to Congress. He wanted to expand the Oval Office. Congress said no. There's always been consultation. There's always been back and forth, even if the two sides disagreed with each other. So the American people knew it was coming. That's why, I think 24% of Americans support this. Donald Trump doesn't care because right now in this Republican-run Washington, he does exactly what he wants to do, and they're too cowardly to do anything about it.
So, Joe, this is the presidency as wrecking ball. I think that's one reason that destruction of the East Wing has really upset people in a way that even Trump's most outrageous other actions haven't. Peggy Noonan is a very balanced, sensible person, but she was anguished by what she was seeing. And I think it comes down to the sense that we all have. We've been to the White House or certainly seen photographs of it, and we think of it as the people's house. It was built deliberately to be understated. It's not a palace like Victorian rulers have had. It's the people's house. And Donald Trump has turned it into his own personal property, or at least he behaves that way. You know, in the middle of the night, the bulldozers come in and begin tearing down this historic building. If the Washington Post hadn't run a photograph taken from across the street in the Treasury building, we might not have known for 24 hours that it was even happening. It was stealthy in the middle of the night. And I think that makes people angry. And as you say, how could it be that members of the Congress that's supposed to be the co-guarantor of our freedoms and our orderly system of government haven't said a peep? I mean, it's deeply troubling. There are lots of reasons why we need a ballroom, some place to have more guests. You've been to events at the White House that were held in tents, and you could make a good argument that we do need some space, but not done this way, not done in secret, contrary to the way it was described. Trump seems to have learned nothing from this, but I do think lots of other people watching this have learned a lot, and it's going to continue to bother them.
Yeah, and let's be clear, the vast majority of events that size that could be held in a ballroom of that magnitude would be for wealthy donors. That's who this would be, people buying access to the President of the United States. And Jeff, you know, we've spent time in the East Wing on a number of occasions. A lot of history is there, living and breathing American history, just a blink of an eye, taken down. And you've been writing about this for Reuters, noting that the bulldozer the president has taken here, the bulldozer in the ballroom, and it's how so much of this is Trump. Yes, it's about recreating the Mar-a-Lago experience. We see that at the Rose Garden patio as well, but it's also someone who is really mindful of legacy more and more, and you argue this is about him making a permanent stamp on the White House itself.
Well, it is permanent. I mean, that East Wing is never coming back. If the ballroom at some point perhaps is something that a future president decides he or she wants to change, that's certainly possible. But the East Wing, as David and Joe were just talking about, that's gone forever. And he made that go away so quickly. And some of the historians that I spoke to in the piece that you just referenced talked about the White House and the people involved in this really taking advantage of loopholes. One of the loopholes is the fact that the president is using private donations to pay for this. That means he hasn't had to have the congressional oversight. And another is just suggesting or believing that the National Capital Planning Commission only oversees construction and not demolition. And as a result, they've demolished it without a review and without oversight.
You know, the other thing that's so disturbing about this, Joe, is when you talk to people who aren't journalists, don't work in politics, on both sides of the aisle, Americans just cannot understand how the president has been able to do this. They are watching daily the destruction, or they were, of the East Wing, and no one is stopping him. And I think it does get back to, yes, Congress is feckless. Yes, the Supreme Court has been feckless. But we have heard presidents, both Republican and Democrat, and others defend for decades now the importance of institutions. And when it comes down to it, everyday Americans say, in my own life, I'm not seeing these institutions working for me. Prices are still up. I can't afford a house. You know, I see billionaires gaining access in both parties. And now those institutions have failed to stop Donald Trump from destroying the people's house. And it is a metaphor, as Peggy Noonan and many others have said, because he slashes and burns, and it's shoot first, you know, deal with the consequences if there will be any later. And this is how he's operated the entire presidency, through tariffs, you know, through stopping U.S. citizens on the street with a masked police force. He's daring someone to stop him, and no one has. And we watched the destruction of the people's house day in and day out. And nobody came to do a thing about it because our institutions cannot keep up.
Well, and he's driven out a lot of the reporters, a lot of the toughest reporters that would be asking him questions about this. He's driven a lot of the toughest reporters out of the White House press pool. And it just, I mean, it continues. They've driven tough reporters out of the Pentagon. But it's you know, the president's saying I can tear down the White House if I want to tear down the White House. Nobody can stop me. I can be watching the World Series and get angry at an ad that has Ronald Reagan's voice on it and actually properly quotes Ronald Reagan. And I can increase tariffs to an entire country, one of our best trading partners, on my own. He's saying that. I can call the National Guard I can call the Marines out to Los Angeles illegally, and the Supreme Court's too cowardly to stop me. I can say crime is high in Chicago. They need the National Guard to go out there, and the Supreme Court will be too cowardly to stop me. They'll keep kicking cases down that are clear-cut cases, and they'll kick them down to lower courts. Again, just to stall, to give Donald Trump more time. And I think most shockingly, to me at least, not most shockingly, all of this is pretty shocking, but I mean, they can even have ICE agents stop people on the street because of the color of their skin. And the Supreme Court even refused to overturn that. And, you know, you had Brett Kavanaugh writing, well, if that happens to American citizens, they would be let go immediately. No, that's not happening at all, Justice Kavanaugh. Not happening at all. And we haven't even gotten to the point where the president can just tweet to his attorney general and say, these are the people I want you to arrest. And she has them arrested. So, yeah, the presidency as a wrecking ball, as David Ignatius said, yeah, that's kind of what's happening right now. Certainly has been happening over the past couple of months. While there have been some gains made on the international stage, but I will tell you, there are a lot of people who still aren't playing that game of, oh, he's owning the libs. I love when the libs are angry because he tears down half the White House. I mean, no, that's not why sane, rational people like Peggy Noonan, far from being a lib, are disturbed. And I would say also there are a lot of people who are saying, oh, Donald Trump, if he gets a second term, he's already been president for one term. What could go wrong?